Ladies and gentlemen, I forgot what I was going to say. Welcome to, I'm like, wait, what podcast is this? Welcome to the Extraordinary Family Life podcast. We are your hosts, Greg and Rachel Denning.
If I'm here, obviously it's not the Be the Man podcast.
Right. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm looking at my wife. And now I'm distracted because I was looking at my wife. She's such a babe. I'm like, what am I supposed to say? Oh, no. How do I start this thing?
Get to the point, Greg.
Yeah,
Get to the point.
Okay, I can't talk. So there I was, pre-Rachel. So you can imagine my life was empty and dark and dreary, with no meaning or purpose. But I was in the, that's for a different episode. This is the wandering, lost aimlessness of singleness. And I mean that sincerely.
Sorry.
We can't go there.
I distracted you with that comment.
So now you want me to go back to my story?
Yeah.
So there I was again, university. And I had a mentor. I was studying pre-med. I love medicine. I love the human body. I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon because I'd spent a lot of time with doctors and surgeons repairing my body as a teenager. And I thought, man, I want to be an orthopedic surgeon. So I'm going along that track. And then one of my mentors at the university pulled me aside and he's like, man, you really need to be a teacher. And I was like, yeah, I love teaching. Because I by my early 20s, I had fallen in love with teaching and just the thrill of sharing ideas with somebody that changed their lives. I love that. So I dove deep into pedagogy and kind of shifted my major and just got on this track of intensely studying pedagogy, which pedagogy is just the science of effective teaching. And so I got in this path and I ended up being a teacher for a private institution for several years. And one of the best teachers I've ever seen, ever. He was just phenomenal, world class, and had taught all over the world. He came in, he was doing this small training with us, a group of teachers. And he said, effective teaching will eliminate the vast majority of problems in the classroom. And man, what he said struck me with such force and power. And at first you don't want to believe it, right? He says, look, if you're a world-class teacher, then a lot of the discipline problems or the troubled students or the difficult students, the problems in the classroom with the kids messing around, goofing off, fighting, whatever, not paying attention, sleeping, throwing things, the rebellion, all this stuff. He's like, the majority of problems in the classroom are removed when a teacher is really good. And I realized that was true because I'd observed in studying teachers, I had observed that the really great teachers, like the captivating speakers and teachers, they grab the attention of the most difficult kids.
And they didn't have the discipline problem.
They weren't walking around, hey, knock that off. Hey, I'm going to call your parents. Hey, you have to go talk to the principal. There was no threatening. So they weren't going around with the carrot and stick like everybody else does. So I'd observe other teachers, and they were constantly, discipline. And like they spent the most of their time dealing with the few students who were causing the most problems. Right. And then they would give classes about how to effectively handle discipline in the classroom, where the phenomenal teachers didn't have to deal with it.
Exactly.
It was a non-issue because they were so good. And then I realized.
Okay, so you started this story, and I was sitting here thinking, like, where is he going with this? Like, what is the point? How does this connect to what we're talking about today? But that right there makes the connection, because what we are talking about today is the truth that effective parenting removes most of the discipline problems in the home.
Or parenting problems, right? So being really good as a teacher and a mentor in your own home, parenting effectively
eliminates, prevents, removes almost all the need for discipline, all the behavior problems, all the issues that come up. Most of the things that parents are looking for answers for, like how do I punish? How do I discipline? How do I give timeouts? How do I do this? They become a non-issue when you become really effective at parenting and mentoring.
Whoa. What you just said is straight up crazy talk.
It's huge, though. It's huge.
And it's true.
And it's true, despite the fact that many people listening to this don't want to believe it, despite the fact that I didn't want to believe it.
Nor I.
But the longer I think about it and study it, which has been at least since I was a teenager, because of my own experience as a teenager, I started thinking about it. And you guys, anyone who knows my story knows I was a rebellious teenager. I did a lot of partying and rebelling because, well, I wanted to understand why. Like, I was curious, like, why am I doing this? Why do I choose to do these things? And I wanted to know what was contributing to my decisions. And so that put me on the path of studying human psychology, studying parenting, studying the ideas behind it. And the more I have studied that, the more I realize that, yes, it is true. Despite the fact for the majority of parents, that's a very painful reality. To finally realize, because I had to finally realize that my ineffectiveness as a parent was causing my parenting problems. It was causing the problems with my children.
Boom.
It was causing or contributing to all the problems I was having with my kids.
Right.
Came from my ineffective parenting.
Now, why is that so painful? When we say things like that, and this is bold. Actually, I want to back up a little bit. There are books and books and books and classes and seminars, entire courses on parenting made by these parents, and all of it, the whole content is on how to effectively discipline. Mm-hmm. And we're saying, wait a minute, if you become a really effective parent, you don't even have to deal with that stuff.
Yeah.
It's a non-issue. We don't have to walk through all these role-playing and all these scenarios, and we don't have to like, what about this, and what about this, what about this? All of those things.
How do I handle curfews? How do I handle talking back?
Timeouts
How
and
do I handle
spanking and
tantrums?
grounding, and all those things just, they go away. And you no longer need to read a book or take a class or get a course or ask your advice how to do those things because they're no longer part of your family experience.
Well, and the interesting thing, too, is that it becomes this sort of intuitive wisdom where you, and I obviously would add God, and intuition and the universe become the source. You don't need the book because you are the book. Like, you are the source. You can tap into this intuition that helps you know what the right thing is in the moment for this child and their unique needs, right? And so that becomes, at least for me, the guide instead of wondering which technique
that's
and
combined
hack
with
do I apply.
A skill, though. Because I agree with you. There's
Yes.
intuition and there's this knowingness that's awesome, but it has to be combined with a skill,
Absolutely.
very specific
That's why I
skill
use
set.
the word wisdom, because wisdom to me is the culmination of skills and experience
Right. It's a
and
proper
exposure.
application of knowledge
Yeah,
and skill.
exactly.
Right? So it's so profound. And I realize what we're saying is bold. It's very
And,
bold and
yeah,
crazy. It
it's-
might not be very popular. In fact, it's not going to be common.
No,
This is what we're saying is
not.
rare. Because the vast majority of people out there, parenting experts, whatever, they're going to be, well, try this technique and do this technique, and this is how you handle when they do this, when they do that. But go back to me with the classroom. If I'm standing at the front of the classroom and I'm sitting at blah, 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 I'm doing, the Charlie Brown thing. He's up there at the front, blah, blah. And let's just say, picture me at the front of the classroom, and I'm just I'm boring. I'm up there
I'm
just
just a boring.
talking head of boringness. Doesn't matter what the subject is. Because you might say, well, it was the subject. My kid didn't like the subject. No way. I've come across amazing, spectacular teachers in every subject. Mm-hmm. I've met teachers that make math look like magic, and art and science, and I struggled with English and English grammar and those things. And I had English teachers that awakened this love of learning for me in the hardest subject. And I was just captivated by them sharing their stuff. So it wasn't the subject. It was the teacher. So picture me again in your heads. I'm at the front of the
And
class.
it's not the kids because...
Well, that's what I'm going right now.
Yeah.
Because I'm up there and blah, 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 blah. And now picture the classroom. There's 30 students in there. They start to doze off. Some of them doze off. Others are so bored out of their minds.
They're moving,
so
they're
then
wiggling.
they're just fidgeting, twitching. They're like, I'm going crazy. So they start throwing spitballs. And others start getting on their phones. And others start passing notes. And others start like pranking each other. Others like they're just back there talking or whatever. And they're getting into trouble. Every kind of trouble. They're disconnecting. They pull out their stuff and they're working on something else. They become very dishonest. They become very deceptive. They pull out the book of, the textbook of whatever subject I'm covering, and in front of it they're either writing notes or drawing, or they're working on homework from another class. And so it's all this deception, all this stuff. And all of it, all of that, all the misbehavior is a reaction to my ineffective teaching, right? So now let's go back to the home. If in my home I'm not effective and really good at teaching, coaching,
Connecting,
mentoring, connecting,
building trust,
modeling, all these good things.
explaining, articulating.
Yes, clarification, expectations, systems, habits. If I'm not running my home really well, just like the classroom, now what are my own children going to start doing? Oh man, they're bored.
They're frustrated.
They're mischievous.
They're mischievous.
Yeah, they get irritated and frustrated, which causes a lot of it.
Throwing tantrums. They're
fighting,
talking back.
in a disrespectful way. They're fighting with their siblings. They're fighting with us. The little boys become destructo zones. I mean,
They're not listening.
Yep.
They're not doing what they're asked.
They're not eating the food you prepare, and they're not, like, on and on and on. So we could go there. Just think of
start
all
being
the
dishonest.
parenting problems.
They start sneaking.
Yes. And like they're just looking for ways to entertain themselves. Or if we're too controlling, now they start looking for ways to rebel. And the only reason they're looking for ways to rebel is because we're trying to control them. No
Yes,
human
so-
being wants to be controlled.
So the comparison there, I believe, is absolutely accurate and true. But the painful part of that, and it's true for a teacher. But it's definitely true for a parent. The painful part of that is that we are literally, as the parents, causing or contributing to all the problems we're finding in our home with our children.
Ouch. How can you say that,
I know.
Rachel?
It's difficult and it's painful to hear.
Why? Okay, this is where I wanted to go. Everything was built up
Right.
for this moment. I think, my perspective, at least the way I see things, here's why I misunderstand that. Because when you say, oh, if you're failing to do a great job as a parent, then you're actually causing or contributing to the own problems you're dealing with. So then it comes back to, oh, it's me again. It's my fault. It's all me. And we misinterpret that. We say, I'm the problem, and we misinterpret that to think, okay, I'm a bad person. I'm a failure. I suck at this. I should have never had kids. Da, 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 da. And we at that point where we say, yeah, it's actually the parent contributing to the problems in parenting, where we misinterpret and make a big mess of it all. So
Which is natural, normal, human nature.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. It's
we
just
take it on.
normal.
So here's what I want to do right now. I want to say this so clearly. Like if you're driving or riding your bike, whatever, just like pull over and write this down, take some notes. I want you to internalize this. Parenting is a very specific skill, like tennis.
Well, I would even say parenting is built of multiple skills.
Okay, so right,
Like
it's
tennis.
several skills.
Yeah.
But it might
Combined
be
into one.
Yeah, tennis and pickleball and paddleball and like okay, but whatever. We're gonna go with. I'm just making a comparison here. It's a very specific thing. So I suck at tennis. I personally
In real life.
in real life. This is not hypothetical. I really suck at tennis. I could misinterpret that to be like, I'm not athletic.
I'm not a good person.
Sporty. Yeah, I'm a bad
I'm a
person.
failure.
And so I go out on a tennis court and I hit a ball and it just goes flying into the road, hits a car, somebody's upset, like, oh.
I'm such a failure.
And so you come over and you say, Greg, you caused all those problems because you suck at tennis. Like you hit that ball way over there,
You're
caused all those problems.
ineffective at tennis.
Yeah, like you're not good at tennis. At that moment, I could be like, I'm not a good person. I'm terrible. I'm a nobody. This is horrible. Or I could be like, oh, I don't know how to use this racket yet to hit the ball the right way. It's a very, very specific skill. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I'm going to go out every single day with my racket and this ball, and I'm going to keep practicing until I can hit that ball right back across the net.
But even more importantly, because in some ways I think sometimes parents intuitively do that, since we're, using this as an analogy here. They will go and practice. They go and they're like, I'm going to practice disciplining. I'm going to practice this. I'm going to practice that. But the key here
we're
is
deck chairs on the Titanic.
Yeah, the key here is you have to actually get a good coach,
Right.
a good mentor, someone who knows how to play the game of tennis in this example, to show you how to practice the correct way so that you can actually get the outcomes and results that you want. So now we take this back to parenting. So, okay, but the point is, I want to emphasize this for a minute so they get the message we're trying to share here. Too many people believe that if you're a good person, that just automatically makes you a good parent. And that parenting just comes naturally. It's not true.
You can be an incredible human being.
Yeah. And you can be great at a lot of things.
Terrible at tennis.
Exactly. You can also be an incredible human being and just be terrible at parenting.
Yep.
You just don't have the skills, just like you don't have tennis skills. You just don't know how to hit a racket, use a racket. That is what we're trying to tell people.
I struggled with that concept so much because I knew incredible men that I respected so much. They were amazing leaders, teachers, businessmen, and these men were amazing. I admired them so much. And they sucked at parenting. And I couldn't put it together.
Yeah, for the longest time.
Why are their kids just failing and bombing and it's like this man that I admire and respect so much, his kids are all bombing one after another. I'm like, the common denominator here is him. Like, what's off? And it wasn't until years later I'm like, oh, because parenting is a very specific skill.
Yeah.
He was great at business. He was great at leadership. He was great in the community. He did not have the skill to lead his own children. Specific. So it didn't make him a bad man. Didn't make him a hypocrite.
Right.
He just was not good at tennis.
Yeah.
In the metaphor.
Exactly.
Right? And we have to know that.
So that's the framework we want parents to have, to understand that if you're having problems in your home with your children, the reason why is because of the things you are doing or not doing.
Yep.
Just like if you're having problems playing tennis, it's because of things you're doing or not doing. Like it's a direct connection. There's no other, you can't blame the other player. You can't blame the ball. You can't blame the racket. You're doing it. You're the one playing the game, right? So it comes back to you. It is exactly the same with parenting.
I'm on the tennis court hitting the ball every which way but back over my opponent's side, and I'm like, it's the government. The IRS.
This ball just has a mind of its own. Yeah. Like it's just a rebellious ball, you know?
I need a different racket.
But that's what we do with our children because of the fact that, yes, we're actually dealing with another human being. So there's a variable involved there. Our children are not balls that we just hit wherever we want. Right. This variable.
They are not objects.
Exactly. They're not objects.
They are not inanimate where you pick up a rock and you set it over there and the rock stays there. Exactly. Right.
And in fact, some ways, if we want to continue expanding this analogy, this metaphor we started with, I think in some ways they become the other player. There's someone we're learning to play the game with so that we can get the outcomes and results we want. We want to play the game of tennis. We want to hit it back and forth. We want to have a fun time. But unless we learn to work with our children instead of controlling them, which is a lot what we're going to talk about a lot today, we're not going to be getting the outcomes we want. We're going to be frustrated and overwhelmed and stressed, wondering why parenting is so hard. And it's because we just haven't learned the skills of playing the game. Because parenting is a very specific skill you need to learn. So,
if I'm trying to serve my opponent, I mean, we're just going on with this. If I'm trying to serve my opponent and I never get the ball across, how long will my opponent stay over there waiting to play tennis with me?
Yeah.
They're like, I'm out. You haven't got the ball once in my court. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And our kids do the same. I want to touch on something else real quickly before we dive into that. There are so many, and I'm thinking, and I'm not trying to be mean or rude or disparaging, but there are so many parenting experts and very, very famous, very well known. And their entire platform are tactics and strategies for discipline and handling situations. And to me, I look at that, I'm like, all you're doing is straightening deck chairs on the Titanic. And what will happen is parents will read their books and take their courses
and they
watch
do all the
their
right
videos
things.
And do all the
they
things.
Read the scriptures together and they pray together and they go to church and they do this and they check all the boxes. And then their children don't turn out the way they hope to. More importantly, their children make decisions that are destructive to their own well-being, the child's well-being, and they wonder why. Where did we go wrong?
I did all the things.
I did all the things you were supposed to do.
I even went through the courses and the classes and I checked all the boxes. I did all the little disciplining techniques that I was told, and it still didn't work out.
Right.
And that's because that's not the approach.
Right.
Like, The last thing I want to do as a parent is become an expert at disciplining. Because if I have to perfect my disciplining, I have a much bigger problem. I've got to go upstream and change things so that there's no discipline problems. Like I want to emphasize this and try to articulate it clearly enough that listeners just, you get it. Like if we do a phenomenal job at parenting, there's no discipline problem downstream.
And one of the best ways I've heard this explained came from The Anatomy of Peace, which is a book that focuses on helping, this framework of helping things to go right. They have a whole pyramid, and most of the pyramid, 75% or more of the pyramid, is focused on helping things to go right. And the very top piece of the pyramid is fixing what's gone wrong. Yep. That's what we're talking about. Where the example you were just giving talks about how most parents spend their time trying to fix what's gone wrong. I'm going to discipline. I'm going to punish. I'm going to ground. I'm going to put you in a timeout. I'm going to all of these things.
They're literally trying to be experts in that.
Yeah, they're trying to be experts in the disciplining when we're like, no. Yeah, have some strategies for that. Get good at that. But that should be where you spend the least amount of time, because the rest of your time is spent helping things to go right, so that those issues don't become a problem. And it's true. It's real. Like, people might think we're like, this is a pipe dream, but it's not.
No,
it's a reality.
Yep. We have real results for 20 years. This is,
and not just us. We're not just the anomalies here. Like, we're the only ones in the world. There's, I don't even know how many of parents. Yes, they're rare. They're more rare.
It is more rare.
But the people we have learned from are the ones who have.
Well, and the people we've taught, they go ahead and do this.
Same with clients.
Like our coaching clients come back and like, wow,
this actually works. Wow.
Our family dynamics, everything is completely transformed. All the stuff we were struggling with is now no longer an issue at all. Mm-hmm. And that's the point. So let me restate that. Many parents, without knowing, and again, we're not throwing anybody under the bus. We're not making anybody feel bad. It's just we've never taught. As people, as parents, we were never taught this, and it's still not being taught in society. But the vast majority of parents are spending 85% of their times fixing things that have gone wrong, and maybe 15% of the time, helping things go right. We're saying today, do the opposite. Spend the vast majority of your time helping things go right. And if you do that, then you'll only have to spend a tiny part of your time fixing the little things that get off here and there a little bit. It's just tiny adjustments. Restate it another way. Become an absolute expert in helping things go right so that there are no discipline problems, instead of seeking to become an expert in disciplining because there's so many problems and it's never any problems. And drinking the Kool-Aid of other parents saying, oh yeah, it's always problems. Your kids will always rebel. Toddlers will always be tough. Teens, the teen years are terrible. Blah, 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 blah. All this crap. They just spout on and on and on. And if you drink that Kool-Aid and you buy into that philosophy, then you're like, man, I better become amazing at disciplining. Why not instead become so good at your true job as a parent that
which we call
problems,
parent mentoring, essentially, to differentiate it from just the idea of parenting in general. But I want to emphasize, though, because going back to this analogy with the tennis and the fact that some of the things we've said can make people feel bad because we're saying you're the problem, you're the one causing the problems that you don't want in your family relationships. The other way of viewing this, because again, you could take it as I'm a bad person, I'm no good, I'm failing, I feel guilty, I feel shame. But the other way of seeing it is viewing it as an opportunity, and actually as like a wonderful thing, because in reality, if you're the one causing the problems, guess what? That means you're also the solution.
Yep.
Like, that's a big deal. That's a huge plus for you. It doesn't mean you're just doomed to an unhappy family or rotten kids, or because it's bad luck, or because it's completely out of your control. The good news is there is way more in your control than you formerly were aware of.
Yep.
Now, that doesn't mean it's 100% in your control. That doesn't mean you're going to have perfect outcomes. That doesn't mean that it's going to change overnight. Because unfortunately, parenting is also connected to our habits and our way of thinking and our beliefs and our, there's a lot that goes into it that needs to be addressed. But the good news is this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for you to actually take back control, and we're going to talk about control. I'm not talking about controlling, like being controlling. Take back individual control,
Yep.
or even better word is responsibility, of saying, I have power to create change in myself and in the way that I interact with my children so that I can get more of the outcomes I actually want. Instead of unknowingly sabotaging our relationships by participating in these drama triangles and all these other things that are going on that I don't have awareness of, that's causing the problems I don't want. I can stop that. I can change that. I can be a force for good and for change.
And can create a total transformation in the family.
Yeah.
So amazing. What's interesting and maybe ironic about this is we are not talking about like inherently bad parents that are
No.
negligent, that don't care, that like whatever. There are some really truly bad parents. We're talking about good people who are striving to be good parents, and they genuinely want the best outcomes for the kids.
And they're intentionally taking actions to try to get those outcomes, but they're not getting the outcomes they want, and they're wondering why. What's happening?
Ineffective strategies or
Yeah.
or ineffective skills or lack of skills. So it is a good parent trying to have a good relationship and get a good outcome with a kid. But the skill, the strategy, the technique, it's missing. And so no matter how hard they try, and they've, quote, tried everything and all their best efforts, and they're praying and they're fasting and everything they do, just doesn't work. Because a little bit farther upstream, it's still ineffective. And if we can get up to that point and make the adjustment there, then the cascade effect or the trickle effect, everything starts to happen, and it can happen very quickly. I recently received a message from somebody I'd coached maybe a year or two ago. Unbelievable transformation in their family because she had implemented the strategies I taught her into her marriage first. Well, actually into herself first. Like you work harder on yourself than you do anything else. That's number one. So let's say, hey, you got to work on you. Then you got to work on your marriage. And then together, you guys work on your family dynamics, your culture, all that stuff. And like I was just sitting here all giddy and just filled with excitement and joy and gratitude. Complete transformation in their family because these things were implemented.
Like what?
Well, and okay, you guys, I get to work with people who unfortunately let it go so far that there's suicide attempts, drugs, violence, crime, like some extreme stuff, sad stuff. And this was one of those cases where it had gone very, very far. And they reached out to me like it just in total desperation and pain. I was like, okay, let's make some transformation. And so it has all shifted into very, very good places, happy places, joyful places. It's amazing. And it was so exciting. So this stuff just works, but it cannot be, I got to emphasize this again. I'm going to say this so many times until it just sinks in. It cannot be the little tips and tricks and tactics of when your kid talks back, you do this, and you discipline them, or this, any attempt to say, well, this is the best way to ground your children. This is the most effective way to do timeouts or spanking, like anything along, like the very best strategy for grounding is still a crap sandwich because it should be completely unnecessary. We haven't grounded our children. We haven't used timeouts. Like we have no discipline problems.
Early on we did some timeouts.
Because we didn't know any better. Yeah. But as soon as because it was ignorance and lack of skills, as soon as we got the skills, we're like, oh. So even from the very beginning, though, I'm all fired up.
Because I know people are saying, but okay, this sounds great. What do we do? What are these strategies? What are these skills? Like, how do we do what you're talking about? Okay. That's what they want to know.
Let's do it. Tell us, Rachel.
Did you need to finish something? Or
even early on, I just felt like at the very, very beginning, we adopted Kaya. I just felt like, no, I don't want to do any grounding or timeouts. Like it's the timeout thing I thought was retarded.
Well, and I did that especially early on, because I didn't know any
Had
different.
no idea what to
So
do.
when we're talking about these things, we're speaking from firsthand experience because we started out as normal parents. You know, it's not like we were given any special skills right off the get-go.
Right. Our
We
adoption
had
papers
to.
did not come with an amazing manual for
No,
parenting.
it did not. We brought her home when she was 5 days old, and we had to learn from the beginning. We knew nothing. So what we have learned has come from trial and error and experimentation and research and study, and actually, like, our focus has always been on what gets the results we want.
Because results
But
don't lie.
not only gets the results we want, but also gets them in the framework of maintaining a relationship with each child for the long run. Because I know, a lot of people will use yelling or timeouts or these different things because they quote unquote work, but there is an exchange rate for that. There's a cost.
Yep.
And that cost is often, one, underdevelopment of the child, because they don't learn. Ultimately, as parents, what we want our children to learn is how to manage and lead themselves.
Right, exactly.
That's been one of our primary outcomes. We're not here to tell you what to do. We're here to teach you how to
Lead yourself.
lead yourself.
Yep, exactly.
Two, it comes at a cost to the relationship, because inevitably for you as a parent to enforce any sort of discipline or punishment on a child, it requires force. It requires a form of force. And anytime you have to use force, you are weakening the relationship with your child, because a truly strong relationship of trust, and this, we know this when we work with adults, like if you have to force someone or manipulate them to get them to do what you want, that's not healthy. And the same is true with children. People don't fully understand that your children are just little people,
Yep.
and they deserve the same respect that you would treat any adult. And so if
Not
you have
any
to
adult,
force
an
them,
adult you admire and respect.
exactly. So if you have to force them to do something,
If you have to threaten them.
in order to enact some sort of disciplinary measure, you are damaging the long-term relationship, which is why then children and teens and adults grow up to resent their parents or to not have good relationships with them because of the tactics that were used on them while they were young that they still have buried emotions about, right? Like it can get quite deep and complicated here.
Yep, exactly. I'm picturing in my mind like this foundation that every time you yell, every time you threaten, every time you manipulate, every time you try to force or control, it's like taking a sledgehammer and just smacking the foundation. You get a foundation stone and you just hit it, and it might be little chips coming out, little pieces breaking off, whatever. And you're like, no, it's still good, but it's like the pounding the stone. You hit it and hit it and hit it and hit it, and at
Eventually
some
it breaks.
point, eventually, it just puts this big crack through it and it breaks.
Well, sure, I like that as an analogy as much because that's assuming there's already a foundation there. And in fact, I think many parents approach parenting assuming that there is a foundation, that I'm your parent, I've sacrificed for you, I gave birth to you, I fed you, I clothed you, I got up in the night with you, like you owe me. If I ask you to do something, you owe me. They're assuming that there's this foundation of trust, when the reality is it's not there.
Right.
Because for your child, they are oblivious to all of the things you have done for them. They're oblivious to the sacrifices you've made. You have to earn that trust with them every single day by the
Actually.
actions you now take with them today. So if you're
then-
doing things that are quote unquote destroying this foundation, what you're really doing is you're just not building a foundation. There's no foundation of trust being built. And unless you have a foundation of trust with your child, you have no influence over them or in their lives as a parent. You just can't. You can't be someone they look up to and trust and go to for advice unless you have built that foundation of trust.
Just philosophically.
But this starts, just to add to that for a second, building this foundation of trust starts in the womb. I'm going to be that bold. And then especially from birth. Building a foundation of trust starts from the moment they are born, on the way, how often you pay attention to their needs, whether you feed them when they need to be fed, whether you let them cry it out. And for some people, I know this sounds extreme, but this is the foundation of human psychology here. Your child is learning whether or not this is a safe world and they're surrounded by people they can trust by whether or not they're actually listened to as a baby. And then it goes up from there to every interaction you have with them, to every word you say to them. And I know that this feels so heavy. It feels like such a huge weight that is even bigger than we can bear. But the reality is I've learned we can bear it. We are strong enough. We are their parents, and we have the ability and capability to bear this burden and to be able to do it well and healthy and happily so that we can give them the foundation that they need in order to thrive as happy, well-adjusted, competent, capable adults in this world.
It is a gigantic responsibility to raise a child, to care for another human being and help them become a superb adult.
Mm-hmm.
It's huge. So if you have kids, you already have that responsibility.
Right.
You already have that weight. No matter what you've done, if you didn't know better, you're listening to this and you're like, I didn't know. Like, hey, we get it. We're like, yeah, you didn't know.
Right.
So we're not going to be like, oh, you knew
too
and
ba-
you didn't
too
do
late.
it. Too late. No.
Too
You
bad.
can make an adjustment today and start seeing better results immediately.
Exactly.
And over the long term, see massive results and total transformations. But you have to stop doing the things that are ineffective and start doing the things that are effective.
And so, okay, to get into some of the strategies, the specifics, the skills, I truly believe that one of the best things you can do is stop doing the things that are causing damage. It's kind of like the whole idea with a leaking boat. Like the very first thing you need to do is stop the leaks. If you want to keep the ship from sinking, fix the leaks, right? So we have to start noticing, and I would say start with the assumption, especially if you have quote unquote behavioral issues with your kid, start with the assumption that you have leaks, you have holes in that boat. Or if we want to use the emotional bank account analogy, because every single one of us has an emotional bank account with each person in our life, assume that that account is in the negative. You are overdrawn. You have no capital. You have no credit. Like your account is overdrawn with that child. I think that's a pretty safe assumption.
Agreed.
So with that assumption, the very first thing you need to do is stop making withdrawals. Like you can't, you're in debt. You can't withdraw from that account. And then start making deposits because you'll never get back to neutral and then into the positive if you don't start making deposits.
And I can immediately hear some of you saying, but that kid doesn't deserve the deposits. And
Or
there,
if I don't make withdrawals, if I don't punish or discipline, they're going to be out of
they'll just
control.
keep going. And to both of those beliefs or mindsets, I have to just honestly ask, like, how's that strategy working out for you? It's not.
Right.
So stop. You have to let go of, we get so fixated on these ideas and we hold on to them so tightly, whether they came from our parents or a reaction to our parents or we picked them up
We're
somewhere.
doing the opposite of what our
We're
parents
like,
did.
Oh no, I have to keep disciplining this kid so he doesn't think he can just do whatever he wants. I'm like, yeah, well, how's that working out for you?
Mm-hmm.
You've been doing it for months or years. How's it going?
Especially if you look not at the immediate outcomes you're trying to achieve. They're like, well, they don't do it, so it's working. But you look at the more important piece, which is your relationship with them. How is your relation? That's the real question you should be asking. Like, more importantly than whether it's getting the quote unquote result you want right now in the moment, is it creating the relationship you want with them? Not just for today, even though that's good, but also in the long term. When they're adults, when they've moved out on their own, when they don't have to listen to you, what kind of relationship
Right.
are you going to have with them?
Yep.
That's what matters
That's
most.
the result we
That's
want.
that's the real key there to whether or not your strategy is actually working. If you have a horrible relationship with your child, but they don't listen to bad music because you don't let them do it, that's not a strategy that's working.
You're not winning.
You're not winning this
But you're
game.
like, well, but my kids don't listen to it. Well, yeah, because they're afraid of
Right.
what you're going to do.
And-
As soon as you're not around, as soon as they feel like, oh, I can't be caught by my parents, they're going to listen to it.
Yeah. And as we've seen plenty of times, they are listening to it, just not when you're around, right?
Exactly.
But the most important piece is you don't have the relationship with them that you want because you're allowing that little piece, like the music they listen to be more important. Now, and this doesn't mean that children should, anyone can just listen to whatever music they want and it has no effect on them. We're not saying that. What we're saying is you want to help mentor your child to learn how to make good decisions about the music they listen to and everything else in life on their own, to be self-leaders, rather than them not listening to the music you don't want them to listen to simply because you tell them, even at the expense of that relationship.
Ooh, so okay, there's a subtle difference right there, and I think this is one of the most important strategic moves as a parent. And it's a fine line. One line is, I as a parent say, I don't want my kids to listen to that music. Mm-hmm. Just
and
right across the border.
Well, wait, let's expound for a second, because that can come from good intentions. You can know,
it is.
Certain types of music are just not healthy. They're not good. They could have a damaging effect on my child. So it's a good intention, and it's a good principle.
And this is one you and I have.
Yeah.
We do not want our children to listen to inappropriate music because we know what effects it has on their psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the fine line that's on the ineffective side. Just across the line. It's so subtle. It's, I want my child to choose on their own to not listen to that music.
And I think included with that is, I want my child to understand, like I understand, the potentially damaging effects of listening to certain types of music.
So Rachel, you should just tell them, because that will work. If you just walk in and tell them,
I tell them once,
then
that's why you're never allowed to listen to it.
Even if you tell them 10,000 times, you're just going to tell them, they're going to get it, and they'll want it like you want it, right?
Right.
No. It
Not
doesn't
right.
work at all.
Exactly.
So if you're like, well, I'm just going to tell them that they shouldn't eat that junk food, and then I'm going to force them not to. Mm-hmm. Well, that won't work.
And it
won't
doesn't
work at all.
And it doesn't teach this subtle lesson that we're actually trying to teach, like you were talking about. Like, there's just across the line this very subtle difference, but it's the thing that makes all the difference. Is allowing them to choose on their own to not listen to that, because they understand, at their understanding, their level of understanding, like true understanding, why it's bad for them. It's a very subtle difference. Now, the challenge, I think, where most parents get hung up with this idea is that in order to achieve this subtly different outcome, you have to let your children make mistakes. That means they may very likely go through a phase where they listen to music you don't like.
So you say that, and while it is a true principle, it has to be backed up with all the other things we need to talk about still?
Well, absolutely.
Or that's just an
It's
epic
not
fail?
just the one piece.
Because if you're like, well, the Denning said I should just let them choose and make their own choices. And you're like, it's a dumpster fire because I let them choose. Well, yeah, but were you mentoring them? Were you teaching them? Were you coaching them? Were you building a relationship? Were you talking?
Devotionals, discussing music.
Every single day, teaching and teaching and teaching and teaching and teaching.
We've literally had we call them family devotionals. A lot of people view that as a religious term, but for us it's just something we devote ourselves to every morning, which is discussing ideas and books and concepts and all types of things. And we've literally had family devotionals where we read lyrics from the songs and talk about them, right? Those are the type of strategies that, you're right, have to also be implemented with that very subtle difference in order to make it actually effective, instead of just, that one piece. I'm going to let my kids choose. Right. And then that'll solve the problem. And hope that they actually somehow learn that music's bad for them. Right. You're right. It's not an isolated thing. It's in a
very complete package.
Complete package, right. Exactly.
I wanted to add another element.
But let me just emphasize this really fast, though. The outcome is what you want. It's children who know how to make decisions and know how to think about things and analyze things and try to understand and ask questions, and who come to you for advice, asking you about different things because they know that you trust them and you trust them to make their own decisions. And they're also open to your influence and your guidance because you're not controlling them and telling them what they can and cannot do. You're teaching them and guiding them and helping them to decide for themselves.
And and they'll respect you more
Mm-hmm.
if you're teaching them effectively.
Yes, just
Too
like back to
often-
the teacher analogy.
Right, exactly. Too often as parents, we're saying, don't do that, it's bad.
Right.
It's a sin. It's wrong. It's evil. That's Satan or the devil or whatever. And
God
that's
doesn't
it.
want you to do it.
That's all we tell them. And so it's like this super, uber naive,
Basic answer.
black and white. And we never explain why.
Yeah.
We never tell them why. And so they're just like, and you might get them to obey. They might follow along. They might be like, oh, that's sinful,
yeah.
that's evil, that's bad. But as soon as they hit some point of maturity in their life, whether they're 14 or 40, they're going to be like,
Wait a second.
wait a minute. Like, I was always told that was a sin. But that's it. That's all I was ever told.
Mm-hmm.
It's evil. It's a sin. It's bad. If you cannot articulate to them effectively why, so clearly that they understand and like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that makes perfect sense. I totally get it. Then at some point, they're going to buck that. They're going to drop it.
Yeah.
They're going to go away because they're just living in ignorance and naivete.
Right. So I think that you're pointing out another key element to this whole package here is this developing this ability to, first of all, have the understanding yourself, because that's where it starts. Like, you have to be able to ask those questions. Like, well, why is listening to bad music bad? Right? Like, be able to ask that question and then find an answer that makes
because it
sense.
has the F word in it.
And
But that's not enough.
right, that's
if
not
you're
enough.
like, because it swears. So?
Yeah.
Like,
Swear words are just sounds. You
right,
know?
exactly.
They're just-
It's just some sound that means nothing. In another language, that same sound is
it's
made
nothing.
and it's not a swear word.
Exactly.
Like, what are you
In fact,
talking about?
in some language, isn't it French where the F word is literally how you say seal? I think that's
It's
what
something
it is.
like that. It depends
Yeah.
on your tone.
It depends on the turn, but it pretty much is. It sounds just like the F word in English,
Right.
but that's seal in
Right.
French. So, there's that whole element of it. Like, well, why is that even a swear word? Why is it a bad word? You have to be able to go through these questions yourself and then come up with answers that make sense to you, and then be able to articulate those answers to your children. And if you can't do that process right there, you're missing a huge
Yep.
element
Yeah.
of effective parenting.
Because all you can do otherwise is don't do it. It's bad. It's sinful. And you use shame and guilt and threatening and like
Right. And that's
God will
insufficient.
punish you. You won't go to heaven. Like if you try to tell your kids don't do that because you won't go to heaven,
Talk about disconnected consequences. Like,
man, like that is so naive and so ignorant.
how about
so
life here and now?
short-sighted.
How about today?
Yeah.
So we need to be able to make things relevant for our children. They need to be able to understand why whatever you're trying to teach them is important and relevant to them, not just today, but for the rest of their life, right? And yes, eventually, I believe that's all connected to heaven and this idea of a heavenly place. It's all connected. But if you just say, don't do it today because you won't go to heaven, what about all the steps in between?
And the explanation of why, like
Exactly,
the understanding.
right.
So ultimately, I think the chassis, so to speak, of everything we're talking about is something we've used that's worked super, super well for us. It's been so effective. And it's been the fundamental philosophy, our entire parenting journey, is just helping our kids understand, like, hey, is this the kind of person you want to be? Like, genuinely helping them get clear about who they want to be. And then it's easy mentoring there at that point. Every single thing that comes up in life, you can connect it to, is this the kind of person you want to be?
Yeah. And I think even with that question, I feel that there's some subtlety involved because it is almost a question that could be used as manipulatively
Absolutely.
in the wrong way.
Yeah, the way you say it
The way
matters.
you say it, how you say it, whatever. But the underlying idea, and of course that question might change depending on the parent or the child and whatever. But the underlying idea is I want to help you, as my child, someone I love and adore, to become the very best version of themselves and to achieve whatever it is you want to achieve.
Not what I want
Not
for
what
you.
I want
Yeah.
to achieve for you or want you to achieve for me. I want to help you unlock your own potential. I want you to be able to find happiness and joy in your own life. And so my role is to be a guide and mentor to that, not to be the controlling dictator that tells you exactly everything to do so that you get the outcomes that I want for you.
Exactly. Even to the point of something so subtle as don't do that, it makes me feel sad. Or when you do that, it makes me feel bad. See what I'm doing there? I'm trying to get them to stop a behavior, and I'm attaching it to how I feel.
Right. Which
So
is a
then
form of manipulation.
It's total manipulation. And they go their whole life like, I should do good things because I don't want my mom to be sad. I don't want my dad to be mad. Like, no, that's ridiculous. You should be doing good things because you want to do good things.
Exactly.
Because you want to feel good.
Right.
And we'll do that. Like when our kids have fought or whatever, get upset, as we're teaching them, it's like, well, how does this make you feel? Do you like feeling like that? Do you want to feel that way?
Not that we're teaching them to be completely selfishly focused or inwardly focused. I mean, that's an important aspect as well, because that's a key part of awareness, which is key to creating lasting change. But we do teach them to focus on how other people feel as well. But it's like you have to have this balance. If you only do that, which I find too often is the focus, like, well, you're making someone feel bad. You're doing this to them. You're making them, you're doing it to other people. And because of that, you shouldn't do it. That's not enough.
Right.
You need both pieces in this equation. You have to have the inward focus about how do I feel, as well as the outer focus of like, wow, well, how does it make them feel as well?
Yep.
And I think that right there is the yin and yang of creating the change that actually lasts, because it's connected to both parties, right? That's where the lasting change is.
I love this. And, we have a couple of kids in their 20s, and one son, he expressed recently, he's like, he has a desire to make us proud because he loves us and respects us. He's like, I want you guys to be proud of me. But I don't think it is, and I don't want it to be his primary desire.
Exactly.
I want his primary desire to say, I'm going to do these things, and I'm not going to do things because that's the caliber of man I want to be. This is how I want to do life. I don't want him in his 20s or 30s, or if I do want to do this, but I don't want my mom to think this or feel that. It's like, no, that's too underdeveloped.
Right.
Like, there's got to be this sense
Too
of
incomplete.
autonomy. It's incomplete, yeah. This autonomy of like, no, this is the caliber of man I want to be. I want to super world class. I want to be a phenomenal human being, and I want to live life this way. So I'm going to make these decisions, and I recognize that my decisions do impact the people around me and my family.
And I think because you're referencing something that's going on right now in his life where he is trying to make some decisions about things, and from what I can tell he's trying to do is he is asking questions like, I'm considering this, I'm considering this, I'm considering this. And within that framework, I also want to know what you and Dad think about it, because I'm also concerned about, like, I want to make you proud, and I want your opinion and feedback in helping me make these decisions.
And so it's one small piece of
it's
the
a
overall
piece
puzzle.
of the overall puzzle
Yeah.
where he's the one leading, making the decisions, guiding his own life, but is seeking the influence and guidance of people he respects and loves, because we have that underlying relationship of trust.
Yep.
Now, the way that this happens with your child in their 20s is by allowing them to do this process in a miniature way, right? When they're a teen, and when they're a young adult. Like, it's not something that just starts at 20. You're like, okay, now it's your chance, like, go for it. He's been doing this, and all of our children have been doing this from the time we were conscious enough to be able to have this happen, right? When we started allowing this type of decision making starting with small things. It's not, because too many people misunderstand this and they think, oh, well, yeah, I'm just going to let my 3-year-old choose to listen to whatever they want. That's not what we're talking about. In fact, if we go back to the music thing.
Stay up whenever they want, or do whatever they want, or eat whatever they want.
Right. When we go back to even the music analogy, like, we're not saying, yeah, let your 3-year-old pick whatever they want to listen to. We're talking about age appropriate here. But we do let our 3-year-old make decisions about the things they care about.
Right.
If they care about choosing what they want to wear, or whether they're going to wear clothes or not, or, this or that, within reason, we're letting them make that decision.
Right.
And
So
I put in there within reason because, some parents let that go too far,
Right.
Then now there are no boundaries and no structures, and the child actually feels even more uncertain and unhappy, because children do also need boundaries and structure. But within those boundaries and that structure, they should be making all of the decisions that they're capable of making.
Exactly. And an effective way to do that is to set up like safe zones and offer them
This could be
options.
mental, emotional, or physical safe zones.
So would you like would you like to do this, this, or this? And so we give them
Or in
options
some
that are
ways-
within the kind of the framework we want to work within, and we allow them to choose. So like with toys, you lay out some toys. You want to play with this or this, and they're like, I want to play with this sword on your desk. And I'm like, no, there's no way in the world I'm letting a 5-year-old boy play. I guess anywhere from like 8 down. Any boy with a sword, like something's
Well,
gonna get.
if it's a real sword, especially.
Yeah, exactly, and a sharp one, like something's getting destroyed. And so you're like, well, no, I have a hard line. Yes, I will step in and say, you're not doing that, because that is legitimately
Or as
dangerous.
they become age appropriate, you say, okay, well, let me teach you how to use this
Exactly.
sword
And I'm gonna,
safely.
I'm actually
and
going to
where,
get you a knife. Or
and then you provide the boundaries of where this sword
Yep.
is allowed to be used and
okay,
how it's allowed to be used.
Let's go with that, because that's effective parenting. You have a little boy that wants a knife, or a daughter that wants a knife. My daughter just bought an amazing knife in Mongolia. She and I were out doing a laundry run. We had to go find some laundromat in. Oh man,
She's 17.
It was a wild adventure, and Google
Anyways, you bought a
Translate.
knife.
It was awesome. It was, well, I just think of the story. It was an amazing adventure. Anyways, we found this amazing knife, and she's bought it, and she loves it, and she loves carrying weapons. But you have a child that wants a knife.
Well,
And
our
so instead of-
10-year-old
you
has
say,
a knife.
Knives are dangerous. It's like, no, knives are great. Let's do a couple things here. This is really effective parenting, and it's an excellent example. So you could say, no, knives are dangerous. I don't want you to cut yourself. And so no knives. Well, that's not going to work. Because
In
they'll
the
either
long term.
sneak it,
It's
or
not
get,
a
like
long-term
something's
strategy.
going to happen. So you're like, great. Why do you want a knife? And help them articulate it. Like, okay, that's cool. Knives are awesome, but they can be dangerous. Let me show you some pictures. Let me tell you some stories of times I cut my fingers. And then let me teach you how to use a knife. And then I'm going to set up a way for you to earn the knife. Right? So there's all these lessons being learned, all kinds of stuff.
Which would include what we like to call a class on how to effectively and
Yep.
safely use the knife.
So it'll be a knife class, and it'll be fun. It'll be enjoyable, and we'll let them use things. And then we'll let them throw the knife, and we'll let them, like, throw
In
axes.
the proper boundaries.
Yeah, and we'll do all the fun stuff they want to do, and then we'll walk it through. We're like, okay, what happens if you don't pay attention to what's over there, and you throw it and you hit one of the dogs or one of the geese? Walk through that. Like, sincerely, how would you feel if you threw that, you weren't paying attention, you threw your knife, and it killed one of the geese? Man, I'd feel terrible. And I would too, right? If that was me, and I'd feel terrible. So okay, I'm watching, and you walk them through, you teach them effectively, and then when they're like, yeah, they get it, and they practice, you're like, okay, and then help them earn it, and then they get to buy their knife, and they have it. That's great. And then I get my knife out, and they get their knife out, and we use them, and they get to enjoy the experience of something that could be dangerous, but you've taught them those things.
Which then as part of the whole package, also is helping them to develop confidence and capability, which is what you want for your child. You want them to have confidence and capability in all sorts of skills. Using knives, driving things, making things, digging, whatever, dating, all of the things. You want them to have confidence and capability. And the more confidence they build in different skills, the better off they're going to be. Literally, the more developed their brain is, like they just have more neural connections in their brain. That's what you want for your child. So I feel like, there's tons and tons of, ultimately, there are a lot of skills and strategies that go into this. Now, when you learn what they are, I know at first it seems overwhelming because we're used to doing whatever it is we're doing, even if it's not getting the results that we want, and we don't know how to change it. We're creatures of habit, so it's already just a part of how we automatically respond. But in reality, when you learn how to do these things, I feel that hands down, it just makes the job of parenting so much easier. We hear from people too often, unfortunately, who just talk about how parenting is so hard. Like, legit, my heart goes out to them, but also legit, I believe parenting is a joy. Like, I love parenting. I sincerely love parenting. And I think the biggest reason for that is because, one, I'm getting the outcomes I want, and two, I have the relationships with my children that matter. Like, I have really great relationships with all of my kids, and so it makes parenting a joy. and a pleasure. And I think
And we're
that,
even on our fifth teenager.
yeah, exactly.
And you hear, I rarely ever hear anyone talk about that teens are a great experience.
Right. But I have
Ours
loved,
is
yeah.
amazing.
And not that there's no bumps along the way. There are some of those bumps and whatnot, but when you have the right framework and the right strategies, you make it through those bumps, and then you come out, on the other side, and it's awesome. It's seriously amazing. And so I just feel like saddened sometimes knowing how much of a struggle parenting is, and truly understanding that too. It's not like we haven't had tough times with parenting. We definitely have. But it doesn't have to be so hard.
Yep.
There is a way to make it easier and to make it more enjoyable. And
It's with a skill set.
with the skill sets,
What's
exactly.
so cool about this, listening to you say that, is with the skill set, it makes it so much easier and so much more effective.
If we just go back to the tennis analogy, like hands down, you're going to enjoy playing the game much more if you know how to play it and can actually hit the ball across and then hit it back. Like, if you can actually play the game, it's just way more fun to play the game. And so it's the same with parenting, that when you have the skills that help you, quote, play the game, it just makes it that much more enjoyable. You actually enjoy doing it rather than
so do
feeling
your
like
children.
it's just annoying.
Yeah. And so instead of a frustration, irritation, instead of yelling and tears and all that pain,
Every single day.
it's actually you enjoy parenting and your kids enjoy being parented.
Exactly. Right.
It's amazing. Fundamentally, we have to, I want to kind of shift gears a little bit here. I want you to look at any situation or child and just ask yourself, how have I contributed to this problem? That I think has to be the first place to start. So if you're having a particular difficulty with one child or all your children, or with a situation, I think it's the last question to get asked, if it ever gets asked, and it's a hard one. But you stop and say, how have I contributed to this?
I think especially if we can tie that idea into the idea of the emotional bank account and whether you have been making deposits or withdrawals,
Right.
and then getting even more specific about what those deposits and withdrawals look like. You may have no clue what a deposit is for your child because maybe you have rarely made any, at least recently. But you could start getting specific about the withdrawals because you're going to know what sets your kid off. You're going to know what makes them angry or what makes
Maybe
them...
they don't know. I think very often
Well,
they don't know.
Then in that case, I'm saying pay attention.
Yeah.
If you start paying attention, you're going to start noticing because you'll say something and it'll make them angry or upset. That's a clue, right? That something that just happened in that interchange is contributing to this anger. Now, it may go deeper than that. It may be a trigger that's reminding them of something you did before or said before. So, yeah, there's more complexity there. But the point is, by being aware, it's going to help you uncover the facts to get to the root.
One very common problem I see is they'll have a child, a son or daughter, that's misbehaving a lot. Mm-hmm. And whether it's like they're in their... It could be as a toddler, but let's just go even older than that. And you're like, why? What are they doing? Why are they breaking things? Why are they fighting, screaming, yelling, making disasters, like just resisting everything? So often in many, many, many families I've been able to work with, the underlying issue was the child wanted attention and wasn't getting enough attention.
Well, which is connected to the fact that their emotional needs are not being met.
Exactly.
Right. And so
it's the parents might be just racking their brains, and they are. They come to me, they're like, oh, this and this and this and this and this. I'm trying this, and I don't know why they reacted to this, and then it was different. I don't know why, and it was like, oh,
the common denominator.
the common denominator is way back upstream of their emotional needs aren't being met. They don't feel like they're getting enough attention. They don't feel loved and adored and cared for. They don't feel safety and security. Like they're missing that. And so all of these other things that seem unrelated, that seem disconnected, they're actually just little vehicles. They're all just little subconscious vehicles the child's using to try to meet a need. And so you're like, wait a minute, let's go back upstream and meet needs. I would say that has to be one of the most important parenting skills we cultivate and develop, is understanding and meeting our child's needs.
Which is also making deposit. It's the same thing as making deposits in that emotional bank account. I was actually noticing that this was happening in a subtle way last night because we were here at our resort. I was working on some things on fixing our listings for, we have all these different rooms at the resort, and we're hosting a, what are we
Asset
calling?
training.
Asset training, always ready, Toujours Prêt training here in Portugal in November. So I was trying to get those rooms ready and listed. And then we're also hosting a family study abroad program where we're inviting families to come stay with us anywhere between September of this year, 2024, to May of next year. Anyways, so I was working all of this, and some things were messed up, and I was trying to fix them, and my little girls wanted to have dinner together, and they'd made a bunch of brats for us, and I was just like, I have to finish this first. And they kept telling me, which this is good because they've learned to articulate their feelings, which is a wonderful thing. I'm so glad they've learned how to do that. And they've done it. They've learned because we've modeled it for them. But she was telling me, I want to have dinner together because I feel like you've been working all day, and now I want to have this time. And
Which is awesome.
Yeah. But I did legit, like I was close to being done. And I just needed to finish it. And I said, I just need to finish this, okay? Well, it was interesting because I feel like subconsciously, not that she was trying to do this on purpose, because that need wasn't being filled yet, and she had to wait, and she was kind of frustrated about it. It was like both of my girls kind of went into this hyperactive craziness, right? Where they started rollerblading around the house, which I allow them to rollerblade in this part of the house. They're rollerblading around, and they're being very noisy and loud and chaotic. Yeah. And I just thought, this is happening to this higher level because this need is not being met. Exactly. Fulfilled. And they're frustrated about it, understandably. Yep. And she was also understanding that I needed to finish, but subconsciously it's still kind of like this energy needs to get out. And so oftentimes things like that are happening with our children. We're like, why are they being so loud and annoying and irritating and this and that? Well, it's because this need they have is not being met. And many of our kids have not learned how to articulate that. So they don't even know to come and tell you, like, I need your time, your attention right now. Right. I need to spend time with you. They just jump right to crazy behavior because you're ignoring them. You're not giving them, you're not looking at them. You're not touching them. You're not engaged with them. You're not mentally in the same room with them. And so their response to that is some sort of quote unquote misbehavior or acting out. And so the more we can become aware of this, again, talking about helping things go right, we can start to prevent those things from happening simply by saying, okay, and if I hadn't have been so close to being done, I would have just said, okay, I'll come back to this later. And right now we're going to go and we're going to spend time together and we're going to do this. And we did. Well, as soon as I was done, we went and spent time together. We had the dinner. Well, I read a story.
You even let me know because I was out working
and
on
I did.
something.
I let you know. I was like, hey, can you go give their attention?
I had been out wrestling with them because they wanted to wrestle. They were like, let's go wrestle on our new wrestling mats in our gym. And so I was out wrestling with them. We had a great time. Then they came in and did that with you. I didn't know that. And then I was working on something. I came in and you're like, babe, the girls really need some time. They want some attention. They really want to have dinner with us. And so I was able to drop what I was doing. Like, hey, girls, what are we doing here? What are we making? Yeah. What's going on?
But
and
then
they'd set out their little places. And I was like, okay, they want to have a little moment.
You actually got interrupted by an emergency with a guest. Yeah. And so then that's when they actually started going a little bit crazy because now we're both busy handling legit problems that need to be solved. And so, but I'm telling all of this as a real life example of how we can become more aware of what's happening in our homes, in our families, with our children, and then understanding why it's happening. Yep. Not instead of, because I think the old me and too many parents would just, the response would be, stop it, you guys are being crazy. What's wrong with you? Can't you see we have to take care of these things? You get a timeout. Go to your room. That would be the normal parenting response.
On an overdrawn account, you start making more withdrawals by yelling, getting frustrated, sending them off, when what they truly, really want and desire and need.
And that would solve the problem.
Gentleness, love,
and
affection, attention. Yeah. Give them the attention they need and deserve, which a lot of parents want to do the opposite. They're like, I'm not going to give attention to that. That's no way. And we do the exact opposite. Right. So we make the problem worse instead of like, oh, this behavior, it doesn't need discipline. It needs love.
Yeah. And in fact, I remember very specifically as a young mother having this feeling, and maybe it's just a natural human feeling, I don't know, where when my children would do something to annoy me or to misbehave or whatnot, my response was anger or resentment or frustration. And so I didn't want to give them love because I'm like, they don't deserve love right now because they're being such a little stinker. And so my heart would harden,
Yep.
which then, of course, makes the problem worse and makes the behavior worse, because the very thing they want from you, because they're already feeling that in a little bit, they're feeling you closed off to them. And then when you close and harden your heart more, it just perpetuates their bad behavior,
Yep.
because they don't know what else to do but to try to somehow get your attention and love back, even though ironically they're doing things that, aren't love inducing. But when we can learn to change that and to soften our hearts and say, oh my gosh, my child is acting this way because they feel a lack of my love and attention, and can then give that to them instead, that's what helps things go right.
So powerful.
And then you don't have to discipline, because you give them what they need, which is more love, and then the behavior gets better.
Yep.
Because a child who has their needs met
Rarely misbehaves.
rarely misbehaves.
Yep. So this is one of the key things we were talking about at the beginning.
Right.
Like, this is a skill set we need to absolutely master,
Right.
is understand their needs and meet them. And
Exactly.
anytime there's any misbehavior, anything's off, be like, is this somehow related to an unmet need? And if we make that connection, that eliminates so many discipline problems.
Right.
So powerful.
So I want to say, because I'm sure parents are feeling a mix of depression and excitement and inspiration and overwhelm. And, there's a lot of emotions going on here. One thing I want to say is that you and I are actually recreating our Extraordinary Parent Mentoring Method course. And we're going to be walking through and outlining all of these things in a very specific, directed, step-by-step manner that's going to help take all of these topics we're talking about and lay them out simply in a way that's easy to implement. So that's one thing I want to mention, is that we're doing that. That's going to be, in fact, we'll have a link to it in this podcast in the show notes. Then the other thing is just...
Be excited about that. It's going to be amazing.
excited about that. But the other thing is, we do want to talk more about this. So we are going to, over the coming, weeks or months, we'll see, at least, if not every episode, every other episode, be touching on different aspects of parenting skills. Just because we feel so strongly about this. I mean, we truly feel that, not that our approach is unique, because I know there are others out there who take this approach. I mean, some of the most successful, effective families on the planet are essentially doing similar strategies that we're doing. It's not, something that we've just come up with. And a lot of people call this kind of an authoritative approach as opposed to an authoritarian approach, right? And there's like 4 main parenting styles, which we could talk about later, but authoritative is kind of this approach that we personally use, and other people use it too. So we want to talk through them. We want to expound on the specific skills more. So we're going to kind of make this a little bit of a series, because we truly believe, coming back to how passionate we feel about this, that this is one of the most important skills you can learn. Parenting is a very important job, and having children is very important for humanity. And raising great children is a key to creating a better society. So the better we can all get at parenting, the better world we're all going to contribute to.
Yeah, and the happier we'll all be, the more fulfilled we'll all
exactly.
be, the more we can pursue our potential instead of just constantly putting out fires.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And we can literally work together with our children to create big dreams and goals, to create a lasting legacy, to spread goodness to the rest of the world. Like, we can do this together by starting with building a foundation with our children, so that as they grow up, and we're starting to see, we're really moving into this phase of seeing this payoff, that then they become adults who are truly your friends. I really feel like our children, our oldest children, are our best friends. You and I are best friends, but then beyond that, they are some of our best friends, because they're amazing people. We love and respect each other. And it's just so fun to talk with them and connect with them and dream with them and plan with them and spend time with them. It's just such a wonderful experience. And I think all families should strive to create that. And I think it's possible, especially when we have the tools and the skills and the strategies that actually work and that make that subtle difference.
Yeah, exactly. So then we can remove the fight, the battle, the competition,
The bitterness.
yeah, the pain, the hurt, and we feel a need to control an outcome because
Which reminds me, we didn't talk about control.
I'll make a direct link right now. If we become excellent at persuasion, we don't have to control anymore.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there's a direct connection. A lot of parents feel like they have to control in order to get an outcome. That's because they're not very good at persuading yet.
Right.
And persuasion is a very specific skill that is learnable.
Well, and for me, I learned at some point and love to use the word diplomacy. Like, I need to be a diplomat in my own home.
Yep.
I need to have the skills of being able to persuade and influence so that I don't have to control. And, talking a minute ago, I talked about authoritative versus authoritarian. I mean, the main difference with an authoritarian parent is that they primarily use control.
Yep.
To try to get the outcomes that they want from the best intentions. And I know this, like, parents
It comes from
want
a good place.
it is, and it's
But it
generally
doesn't work.
Right. It's generally some of the best parents who have the highest standards and expectations that want to achieve them. Like, they're driven, they're ambitious, they're good people, and they want these outcomes. And so as a default,
they're
they
very
use an
strict.
authoritarian style,
Right.
where they try to force the outcomes. They try to tell their child everything they should do.
I
it
had
can
never
happen.
seen that work out well long term.
Well, right. And it can happen because maybe they learn for themselves. My dad had a little bit of authoritarian style. And I think he had learned for himself through experience what helped to lead to him making changes in his life and him creating a better life for himself. And so he just thought, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to make my children do these things because they lead to a better life. And that was true, that the things he was doing were leading to a better life, but it doesn't work when you make people do it. It's not until we have the understanding for ourselves and then choose to implement it for ourselves that it actually creates the outcomes for them that we want. So we have to learn that differentiation there, that it's the more authoritative, which that simply just means that you have standards, you have boundaries, you have expectations, but there's also this freedom of choice that's involved there, right? Like, you can choose and make your own decisions, but here are the expectations, or here's the guidance, and here's the mentoring, right?
Well, I created a mini course called the Be the Family Man Challenge, and it's 7 different things. They all start with A. One of them was authority. Mm-hmm. And in there, I teach that authority is earned.
Yes.
Sometimes it's just grossly misunderstood.
Right.
You think, well, I'm the parent. I'm bigger, I'm stronger, I
Which
provide
is
around here, I'm the boss.
Definitely a part of the authoritarian
Right.
parenting style.
So
I'm the parent, I'm the authority, what I say goes.
Do it because I said
Yeah.
so, or there'll be
Do it because this is
consequences.
the best way.
Right.
This is how to get this outcome, and this is what you want to pursue. Because if you do, you're going to be able to go to this college, and you're going to be able to do this thing, and you're going to have a better life. So just follow the rules that I outline.
All of
for you.
which is true. Like, we can love the principles and practices, the habits, all those good things, and know these will lead to better things. But if we force it, it'll backfire.
Exactly.
Where if we teach it through persuasion, through
And we
influence,
earn our authority,
earned authority,
by building relationships
then
of trust.
they'll gladly do what we ask versus resentfully do what we command.
Exactly.
And then rebel later on, or avoid it,
Right.
whatever, or hide or be deceptive. All those problems, again, like in the classroom, all the problems come up if we're just doing it ineffectively. So it all comes back to these skills, and we're going to outline those skills. Well, we outlined a bunch here, but we're going to do more in that parenting course. So this is the most important work we do. Think about all the years that you have kids in your home. That's kind of the intense part of it. But then for the rest of your life too, when they're adults and they're out having their own kids, it plays into all this. So once you have children, from that point forward, all you do as a parent is going to be a part of your life. It's going to affect your life, the quality of your life.
Yeah.
And whether
So
you're
true.
happy or fulfilled or miserable and unfulfilled. Like this matters so much. And so we
Right.
have to give it the attention and effort that it deserves. And become really, really good at the important part of parenting so that it eliminates most of the problems. And it totally can be done. So love you guys. Thanks for listening. Reach upward.